Would you say, Dan, that there has been a divide created by maybe more progressive or more advanced, mature MSPs and their counterparts or less mature MSPs, who the less mature being stuck in the server room and the more advanced, mature now having escaped, not left completely, but they have now added to their portfolio a visit to the C-suite where they are talking and having these types of business conversations. Is that a fair statement that you would agree with?
Charles, it's the right statement. It's the right question. And there's not a listener joining us today that isn't thinking about that, right? And thinking about how to do more C-suite boardroom level conversations in their organization, right? The reason for that is because at the end of the day, we're all trying to be more efficient, add more value, create revenue for ourselves and create revenue for our clients.
Is the MSP business model obsolete in today's modern IT environment? That is a very important question. It is not a question that we ask enough of ourselves, and we certainly want to remedy that today. And so I've been honored to have our guest today join us to take a position, not unlike kind of the old classical debate forums where you would take a position and you would explore it from many different angles. And that's what I want to do here, not in a hostile or adversarial fashion, but in an exploratory fashion to hopefully make the topic and the answer a lot easier for those MSPs out there who may be wrestling with this question themselves, but also to illuminate to anyone outside our profession who may be thinking, what is going on inside the managed services profession? Do they know what's going on? Do they know what direction they're heading in? I can assure you, at least from the vantage point of the two individuals here today, we have a pretty good handle of it, and we're going to explore this critical question right now. So, resolved. The legacy managed service provider business model is obsolete in the modern IT landscape. That is our topic. That is our question. Joining me today from the great state of Colorado is Mr. Dan Candee, CEO of Cork. Dan Candee is a seasoned technology executive and entrepreneur with nearly 3 decades of leadership experience. As CEO of Cork, Dan guides the company's mission to empower MSPs in safeguarding small and medium-sized businesses through innovative cyber warranty solutions. Dan, welcome to the MSP Zone.
Charles, thanks for having me.
What is your position? How do you find that topic if someone were to say to you, the MSP business model is outdated, obsolete? What's your initial take on that?
I would pose the question back to those running IT service provider businesses. What were you doing 10 years ago? What were you thinking about 5 years ago? Who were the people that you were engaging with in the past? And what were those conversations like versus the types of conversations you want to be having right now or next year or in the years to come? And I'd be curious to know how many future conversations should involve CFOs, C-suite, and money versus just technology. And if the answer to that question is more, let's talk about finance. Let's talk about financial outcomes. Let's talk about risk as it relates to the impact of people's businesses. My argument is that the evolution of IT services is not moving fast enough. We got to get there. We got to get there faster.
So I would agree with you 100% in that last statement. I think that is an understatement perhaps, and it is a critical failure of our profession if we don't educate our members, our general membership community abroad, the practitioners of managed IT services, that is, in that one statement that you made. I think maybe let's start with the foundational. My personal belief, or if I had to define managed services, which a group of us did in a sunny boardroom in San Diego in 2004, and it was a rather simplified, excruciating ordeal that took about 9 hours of debate and discussion and a lot of raised voices at one point, and then we resolved it to basically being it's a proactive management of IT services to a customer on a one-to-many basis. I think that's the general recollection. But while you could take that as a very simplistic form compared to, let's say, reactive or break fix, which is a very diametrically opposed model of IT service delivery. You are bringing up a question of what are the services being delivered through that managed services model. And if you are not current, you are obsolete. Is that a fair statement, or would you make a change to that?
It is. How about this? If you could start with a clean sheet of paper, let's say you were in that room where you were defining the definition of this. Why did you have to do it that way? I'm wondering, why wouldn't you start with a new phrase? You call it managed business services, MBS, and you actually think about how this industry that we love so much is actually delivering value to our collective client base. That's about their outcomes, whether it's serving delicious donuts to their clients, right? Or healthcare services in rural America, right? Or other IT services, right? Developing technologies, and the list goes on and on, right? If you think of, the thousands and thousands of businesses that we collectively support. At the end of the day, all that we're trying to do is solve business problems. And I think that technology has become so smart, so fast, and will only increase in its impact because of AI, right? Which is just a great tool, right? That that it ultimately is about delivering value to whoever the end user customer is. And that's about business service. It's less about IT service.
Lest any of you joining the program, we are not talking about mortgage-backed securities, MBS. We are talking about managed IT services, or as Dan, you call it, managed business services, which I actually think is a fair point. Would you say, Dan, that there has been a divide created by maybe more progressive or more advanced, mature MSPs and their counterparts or less mature MSPs, who the less mature being stuck in the server room and the more advanced, mature now having escaped, not left completely, but they have now added to their portfolio a visit to the C-suite where they are talking and having these types of business conversations? Is that a fair statement that you would agree with?
Charles, it's the right statement. It's the right question. And there's not a listener joining us today that isn't thinking about that, right? And thinking about how to do more C-suite boardroom level conversations in their organization, right? The reason for that is because at the end of the day, we're all trying to be more efficient, add more value, create revenue for ourselves and create revenue for our clients. And every single CFO or CEO or business owner that has to wear that CFO hat is trying to minimize that risk and increase profitability. And when I talk to literally thousands of managed service providers each year, and I ask questions, I'm still a curious boy, right? Ever since I was a little boy, I was the one who raised the hand to ask maybe too many questions in class because I just didn't understand it. Maybe I'm slow on a lot of topics. I don't know what it is. But when I ask the question, like, what are you trying to solve for this year? What are you trying to do with your business right now? Like, as an MSP, what's your goal for this month, this quarter, this year? And it keeps coming down to, I got to be more efficient. I got to help my team solve problems faster. I got to spend more time with the owners of my clients, the owners of those businesses, right? So that we're actually talking about their financial outcomes, the businesses that they're doing, and minimizing some of the risk, so that I'm talking less about selling them IT services or the next tool, because they don't give a damn. They don't care about that next tool as much as I do. They care about, is my cyber insurance policy going to pay out if I get hit? Or do I need cyber insurance? Or is this the right one? Or what are the bad guys doing? And how do I get my employees to pay attention so that we don't get knocked out? These are the types of questions that I keep hearing.
Which begs the question, do you believe that the average MSP feels comfortable having that conversation with their small, medium business customer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and everybody's on a curve, right? We're all on a learning curve on this one. And it is the absolute obligation of, Cork and many other companies, many other IT service provider vendors, to simplify these types of things. And I think a lot of companies are doing a good job. I'll give you a couple of examples. For Cork, for example, we have a very simple business model, which is that we all must understand risk very simply, very lightly from the inside out, which we are an aggregator of all of the cybersecurity tools that an MSP uses so that there is a single source of truth or that single pane of glass. We have over 100 different integrations. So an MSP simply goes in connects their cybersecurity tools, less than an hour. It's all API driven, right? Agentless, super fast, super easy, super inexpensive, less than $1 an endpoint. And so very quickly, they get to see exactly how secure or insecure all of their clients and those individuals are in their business. And after that happens, then we can start talking about financial protection. And so that's how we built a number of our different tools that are client-facing, cyber insurance analyzers, policy analyzers, and various types of business assurance from $25K warranty up to a $500,000 warranty. And we play very, very well with cyber insurance because I'm just adamant that every business simply has to have a financial protection of some type, from the teeny tiny to, as big as it gets, just so you stay in business. We call it financial resilience, right? So the two elements of this world are risk intelligence and risk resilience. What do you know? And how do you stay strong enough to survive a cyber attack? We got to stay educated, right? And an MSP's got to be educated to be able to have these conversations. When it comes to cyber insurance, an MSP nor Cork, neither of us sell cyber insurance. It's illegal for all of us to do that. Yet we're all technologists, and ultimately we're entrusted by a client to hold on to the data of our clients, right? And so we often are our MSP is put in that tough position of, am I secure? Am I doing the right things? And will you tell the insurance company that we are doing these right things when they fill out these attestations in these various reports? So they've had to become de facto communicators around these things. Companies like Cork, Yukon, DataStream, many others, SeedPod, right? There's a lot of organizations out there that are getting really good at supporting MSPs in that journey so that they have a friend. Immediately can phone the friend and go, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I have the right resource here that can guide you through a cyber insurance or a financial protection conversation. And that's really the first step for all of it.
So so what I'm hearing is the MSP, while maybe not versed in and comfortable with having these discussions, having vendor partners such as yourself at Cork and others, that is the mechanism for having enough information to at least sound like you know what you're talking about. But even if and I do accept it, do you find that the MSPs are gaining comfort by having these vendor relationships that they can say, all right, I can hold my own, and at least even if I don't have an MBA or equivalent, I can go into my customer's office and not sound stupid?
1,000,000%. Because an MSP's got to be able to say two things. One, I am doing pretty exceptional things to secure your environment and take care of you and all of your employees. And even though I'm doing that, nobody can run away from the bad guys these days. They are moving too fast. They're getting too good, and they're playing tricks on folks that are sophisticated and are unsophisticated. And so every business has to carry their own liability for risk. An MSP will never carry somebody else's business for risk. And when we can all be confident in understanding that and saying that to a business owner, that then allows you to ask the question to, like my parents own a restaurant. And so for me, being able to ask my mom and dad, hey, how much cash on hand do you have if you were to get hit by a cybersecurity attack? And they were to lock down all of your goodies, how long could you survive until you were able to get set up and running again, right? And the answer to that question is really informative for somebody that's helping manage their IT services, right? Or helping manage their business. And most MSPs that I work with are comfortable asking that type of question. When you start having that level of discussion, you're in the business level trusted advisor relationship between an IT service provider and a business owner. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But it brings up yet another question, which is, Dan, how many MSPs do you believe are out there who feel supremely confident in their technical chops, their ability to deliver a technical service in a repeatable, efficient fashion, and yet are not comfortable enough to have these types of conversations you're talking about, and therefore they do take on that risk, which is not properly theirs, but the customer has found a willing shoulder to place it. I'm talking about there's a famous scenario of an MSP in New Orleans during the Katrina, right? 2005 got wiped out, and it turned out the customer said, "Well, I thought you were backing up all of our data," right? That kind of thing, right? You've got this, right? You were doing this, and the MSP says, "No, of course not. You said no, and you said that the office administrator was taking the tape backups home," which of course they weren't. They all got destroyed, and on goes the story. There are thousands of stories like that, I'm sure, but that does bring up the question that you're highlighting, which is you cannot rest on your IT laurels anymore. You have to be involved in the C-suite, as you call it, the managed business conversation. Else you are.
That's my argument, right? Certainly the argument that you have put me in here, and I would argue that outside of this seat. I believe that we are rapidly moving towards a world where threat actors are coming after SMB at a rate that I have never seen before. AI as a tool is becoming so easy to use for good guys and bad guys that allows us to all move relatively quickly through business processes and to solve problems that are easy and hard. So things are beginning to accelerate, right? And ultimately, that means that we have to step back and look at the frameworks of how each of us as business owners are operating and ask a couple fundamental questions. What are the services I want to deliver? What do I want to be known for? What are the margins I want to operate at? And how do I want to, ultimately in the next few years, how do I want to be known by all of my customers, all of my clients in delivering these services across the market? If I'm an IT service provider or managed business service provider, I want to be somebody that is very confident in the cybersecurity protocol frameworks that I'm delivering. I think IT services, for the most part, have become frequently commoditized, right? Cloud-based, easy to consume. And I want to be somebody who is becoming a trusted advisor to the businesses, the right type of businesses that I want to keep as a client. Those are businesses that pay their bill on time, that listen to me when I have cybersecurity things, recommendations for them, and that ultimately make long-term decisions that might be a little uncomfortable, such as purchasing a financial protection for their business. A lot of cases that means thinking about cyber insurance or a cyber assurance type of product, right? So that they have resilience after a cyber attack. And if a client is not willing to do these things, then you have to ask yourself, do you want them as a client? Because that client will put you as a business owner at risk, you as a managed service provider at risk. They are literally opening doors to let threat actors into your organization. And I think it's just the painful world that we're living in. I'll give you a specific example and then I'll shut up for a second. I spent 4.5 years at AWS, and I had the privilege of seeing across enterprise, mid-market, and SMB, all types of cybersecurity attacks. And when I was at the enterprise, I was really blown away. I spent a lot of time on Wall Street with some of these large banks and financial institutions. You walk into some of these rooms and there's 100 people focused on cybersecurity. You wouldn't believe the bank account set aside to handle the financial events because they know that they're coming. And they're constant, like the cyber insurance policies and on and on and on. Wall Street's fine. Wall Street will be okay when it comes to cybersecurity events. And the threat actors know that. And so in the last 3 years, they really have started shifting over to SMB into Main Street, which honestly is one of the main reasons why I got out of enterprise and ended up here at Cork and into this business. Because like I mentioned before, my parents run restaurants. My brother is a sheriff. And my sister runs nursing facilities. To me, 44% of the US GDP, that's $13 trillion, by the way, comes from SMB. This is how so much of the world actually operates. And the threat actors know it's so much easier to go get 50K out of a construction company or to fool somebody out of 22K for an ACH wire transfer fraud than it is to go get 50 million out of MGM. And by the way,
Right.
I know this for real because I've witnessed 3.9 million of these attempted incidents year to date. And I have literally written checks to businesses to help keep them in motion this year. As part of our business model.
So that's, I have to be careful about how I phrase this. The shift, and I agree with you that it happened and continues to happen, which is the shift not away from, but adding, in addition to their attacks on enterprise and mid-market, certainly the SMB in the last 5 years has become a lucrative target for the bad actors. And I would say that the extent that they're still operating this area says to me at least one or a few things. That they are finding opportunity and it's working for them and they're doubling down. It's working, right? If it wasn't, they would go on to something else. What does that say about and I hate to call it MSPs because I don't think that there's a lot of MSPs in the true sense of the definition we talked about earlier, but it begs the question, who is protecting, if anyone at all, these enterprises? And does that make sense, right? I'm trying to be very careful here.
It does. And I actually want to tell you some really cool things and honor all of the IT service providers, managed service providers, MSSPs that we know and love. Because having worked closely with so many of them, I see success stories left and right. You wouldn't believe how good of a job so many of our compatriots are doing to protect modern SMB. I mentioned the millions of compliance events that I have witnessed, across all of the clients that we manage. We've got about 40,000 businesses under Cork's protection. There's very few incidents that actually make it all the way through the MSP's protection layer and end up where there has to be a claim submitted to Cork. By the way, we've never denied a claim. A few of these that do get by, it happens because there's no technology that can protect them. It's a situation, I'll give you a very specific example, one of my favorites. This is out of Canada, a managed service provider goes by the name of Plexus. They've been in business for 20 some years. They have fully integrated Cork. They have fully integrated 8 different cybersecurity tools. And at the time of this incident, they had 5 or 6 of these tools deployed on this particular construction company. And in my world, when we see this, it means that every single checkbox is lit up nice and green, right? It means that they are well protected. What happened was the threat actor was targeting construction services in general because they know a construction company is constantly paying invoices. So there's a lot of noise in that system. And so what they want to do is they want to play to, what's happening with people, right? Because people become the weak link, not technology. And so what they did is they infiltrated the architecture firm that services this particular construction company. And they figured out, they just sat there and they watched about 90 days, 80, 90 days. And they watched the invoices and the wire transfers and all of that type of stuff. And when the time
They were already inside the network.
They were inside the network for
Okay.
over 80 days. And then they knew all the invoices that were going to go out of that architecture firm for this one particular construction company that was a Plexus and a Cork customer. They said, hey, all the new business is going to go to this new wire account. Here are your new instructions. And they sent 3 emails to the 3 signers that they knew would have to sign off on the new ACH wire transfer. And the 3 people saw it. They go, yep, all of this looks right. We'll go ahead and we'll change the ACH. And they fired off that wire transfer to the bad guys. They didn't pick up the phone and verify that the change had occurred. They didn't call their friends at the architecture firm and make sure that they should have done it. So all the credit goes to our friends at Plexus, who had the right security awareness training. I think it was Sentinel One, like know before, like on and on and on. They had great technology. It was all of the things had been done correctly. But at the end of the day, the bad guys are figuring out, how do you trick the human on the other end? Does that make sense?
We've come full circle. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And just to be clear, I fundamentally agree with you that the MSPs that are doing what you suggested, like this Plexus in Canada, they're doing what a modern day MSP ought to be doing. And they have a modern day complement, it sounds like, of managed IT services, in addition to this is how it practically impacts you as a business. Let's talk about security. Did it come from a bad security domain or IP address? And so we can start targeting things like that. I'm wondering, so you have MSPs who are not doing that yet. So if they have failed to evolve, which is one category. And then you have the other category, which is the MSP has fully modernized, but the customer hasn't. The customer has failed. And I think you brought up this point a little earlier. There are plenty of customers, end users, who simply say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to spend that because I think that the MSP has me covered. Why should, I'm already paying them. Why should I pay more for extra protection? Is what I sense a lot of MSPs tell me.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you got to have that conversation. Do you want to be the ostrich with the head in the sand or the head standing up? And as a business owner, we all have to make those decisions about our own businesses. And then if you want to be an old fashioned trunk slamming MSP, I think you can put your head back in the sand. But as we look towards, the end of this decade and over the next 5 years, if you shift from an IT focus and you move towards a financial focus, and you start following the money and you talk about the money and the impact of what does the money mean to any of us, and you work backwards from the dollar or the Canadian dollar, you can change the tenor of the conversation. All of a sudden, you're not talking about an EDR. You're talking about the behavior of that rural healthcare and what's important to them. You're talking about the data of the architecture firm or the accounting firm and what the impact is to that business if something goes sideways. If you ask the client, what would happen if all of your data got wiped out? What would happen if, these things happened? Like, it's a different type of conversation.
So to summarize our conversation, if I genuinely like your opinion on this, I would say the MSP business model is not obsolete in the sense that the delivery mechanism of how and what makes MSPs so unique, in that one-to-many, being proactive, not reactive, that is still relevant. But what I've heard from you is, if you are not current in a modern day service portfolio, so your service catalog has not been updated recently, it is not reflective of what the modern needs of your customers are, as well as if you are not having conversations that are business and financial and risk focused, you could very well be an obsolete MSP, despite all the other things that we've talked about. Is that a fair statement?
Let me ask the question back to you so I make sure I understand it correctly. What I'm fundamentally hearing, are you asking about two categories? One is the impact of people, and the other is the impact of technology, right? Catalog services. My response to that is yes to the latter, meaning if an MSP isn't thinking about self-education on how to speak to a business owner about what their interests are and what's coming next as far as helping a business succeed, especially around financial services, then they're doing a disservice to that client and to themselves. Then the answer is yes. The first question is maybe a no, which is, at the end of the day, it's all people. And what the beauty of the channel business and the reason I am here and the thing that I love most about small, medium, and managed service provider is that we are human first and that we show up for each other and that we operate with best intent, love, and service as a framework. And we happen to be delivering technology within that framework. So I really think that it's marrying these two things in an advanced model versus the legacy model, which is the heart of this discussion.
Sure.
Does that make sense? That people matter the most, but you got to start tying it more to the money rather than just the technology.
On that, I have no dispute. I have no problem with that statement. The only question I then have is how do we solve the problem faster and how do we get that message out to the consumer? Because the consumer seems to be having, at least some of them, in some industries, maybe more than others, really reluctant to even consider this as a risk area that they want to start spending money on. That they believe, and this is something that I've been concerned with for many years as a fan and supporter of the MSP business model, is that they look at the MSP as a risk center to place and offload their risk and say, you deal with it, I don't want to deal with it. It's a tech problem. You're saying, and I quite agree, it's not a tech problem. It's a business resilience issue, and until we've realized that, it's going to continue to get worse.
MSPs have got to learn the stories of the clients that do the wire fraud independent of any technology, or the gift card scams independent of any technology, right? And who are doing these things absent of, MSPs and technologies, right? Because ultimately, it's the people in those businesses making mistakes that are costing those businesses the trauma. And oftentimes that is not the responsibility of the MSP. And if you ask the question, if an MSP asks that question of a client, what are you doing about cyber insurance and have you considered it? It at least makes the business owner think about it. What are you going to do about your financial future if a cyber attack ever happens? Most MSP owners think that that's a dangerous question to ask. The reality is it's a safe one because an MSP can't sell cyber insurance. They can recommend a cyber insurance broker or some solution, but they can't sell it. It's not their responsibility at all. It's not their liability.
No, but I think perhaps for round two, should you want to come back on the program, we could talk about the role of insurance and cyber frameworks and other solutions like yours at Cork as cudgels or as levers for the MSP to say, this is how we are going to make you safer. It's because you're going to be unable to procure cyber insurance at an affordable rate until you start to address some of these issues, let alone do you care about the resilience in your company enough to protect against these?
It is, on that topic, is the number one best wedge for an MSP to actually sell more IT services to a client, because the cybersecurity insurance company is the one who will say directly to the client, if you add service A, B, C, and D, your cybersecurity insurance premium will go down, etc. So all of a sudden you have the insurance company selling on behalf of the MSP. It's pretty cool, but most MSPs don't actually know that. So happy to help.
I would agree with that, and that's an area where I would love to join forces and add our voice to that, because that's something that we've long held to be true. So to summarize, the business model for managed services is still the same as it has been since the mid-90s, which is you have technology tools, you have a process, and you operate in a very ultra-efficient fashion in a way that your customers can't, and therefore, that's why they don't have an internal IT department. That's why they have you as the MSP. But to Dan's point, if you do not have a current, up-to-date technology and service delivery portfolio, and you are not having conversations with the C-suite, where you are talking about business and financial impact to cyber, technology, all of these things, you are missing out and you are, if not obsolete, then you certainly are risking obsolescence and risking market dilution and being less credible, I would say, less competitive, certainly. So all things that you can change, though, I would say. All things can be changed.
I would agree with you, Charles.
Well, until next time, I hope you enjoyed this discussion, this friendly debate. And thank you, Dan Candee, CEO of Cork, for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. See you soon.